We are stoked.
I'm a terrible sore loser. I don't follow the rules.
All the bearded guys seem to lie. Yeah.
There are rumors galore.
I am so up and down on my emotions right now.
Retain salad.
Okay. Where there is smoke, there is always fire, etc., etc., etc.
You don't do it.
Been there, done that.
And we'll get into it later.
They know crap about hockey.
Come on. Well, I laugh it off.
I have no issue.
Here's the thing, though. I have nothing to do.
I'm okay with this deal.
There was no other option.
So now you have nothing.
We already blew it.
Win now, win now.
It paid off.
I will eat my pants.
Hey guys, it's Two Guys in Hockey Talk. I'm Pavel, the cat, and I've got
Evan Reynolds coming at you with another episode here at Two Guys and Hockey Talk. Welcome, Pavel. How was your week?
It's been busy, it's been cold, but it's been wonderful. How about yours, Evan?
Well, I'd say it's about the same since we live really close to each other. And busy.
Not that close. I have enough space to get away from you, right?
Yeah,
the length of my beard is the length that I'm far away enough from you, Evan.
Yeah, sometimes it's the length of my beard. I got the stubble today, man. Woo! You guys all be proud of me. All right.
So, Evan, welcome to season 3, episode 14. We're excited. We have another great episode. It's just going to be you and me tonight. We have some special guests you're going to ring through in the next little bit here of who's coming on the show. We hope you tune in. Remember to like, subscribe, share, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the whole enchilada, right? Woo. Everything at once. Evan, it's been a packed, crazy week. But before we get started, because we got a lot to talk about, do you have your bevy?
Got her here.
You got her bevy. And are you, liking your hat, in the holiday spirit?
Ooh, I am in the holiday spirit. We got this week and one more week before we take 2 weeks off for our own holiday so that we can repack, rest up, and come back with a 2022 full of jam-packed guests and excitement here at Two Guys in Hockey Talk. So, Pavel, let's roast it.
Let's do it. I feel like I'm going to have two guys withdrawal, and I'm just going to sit in front of a screen talking to myself like during the Christmas holidays, and my wife is going to ask me what's going on, right?
So just pay attention to our Facebook page because there might be short little videos coming from Pavel the Cat just because he's lonely and needing to talk hockey. Okay, hey, I just want to throw a little teaser out there for you guys. Next week, one of our former guests is joining us again next week for our show. Sean Mullen, former play-by-play voice of the Swift Current Broncos. For those who are very familiar with Stuart Skinner, the backup goalie, third-string goalie in Edmonton right now. He followed his career. He was a part of Colby Cave, who, God bless his soul, has gone on. Rest in peace. And, man, fabulous guy, but he knows lots about junior hockey, tons. And so we're very fortunate. We're going to come on the show next week. We have a special edition. We're going to talk prospects, but mostly with prospects and juniors. We are going to talk about the World Junior Hockey Championship with all the teams coming from around the world. So in the new year, we are working on a few others. Right now, we do have commitments. We just don't know the dates. So another former guest that actually started a lot of our guestdom was a former CFL champion, former football player with the Edmonton Double E Club, as it was called back in the day, Jed Roberts. He is a massive Oilers fan. So for all the Oiler faithful, in the new year, we have a lot of discussion coming. So we'll see how your team's doing come that period of time, as well as we're hoping to get on Cassidy Sobe. She plays with the Professional Women's Hockey Association. She's playing out in Ontario, and she has agreed to come onto our show as well. So we're going to get to ask goalie questions. And Pavel, we were just talking before coming on air right now about the whole thing of goalie coaches. And she can probably answer some of that stuff. So hang on to those questions. All right.
So make sure you send in your questions if you have anything about the Oilers, about goaltending, about the juniors, And unfortunately, I'm so upset that I'm leaving Edmonton at the time where I can finally go to the juniors, and I have to go hang out with my in-laws, which I love, but, you know, I'm going to use air quotes because I have to sit, you know, in the warm summer or warm days of Victoria rather than actually enjoy some hockey. But anyways, Evan, there's a lot going on in the NHL right now. The biggest thing we're dealing with is COVID. COVID. You know, someone famous said that, right?
Yeah.
What's going on? Take us through this.
Okay, let me just kind of set it up and let's walk through this together. So first up, right now, Ontario is set to reduce capacity limits at sporting events. This is very important to know in the province of Ontario in Canada, as well as Dr. Andrew Morris. He's an infectious disease specialist at Mount Sinai in Toronto. Go on to TSN, you can learn all about it. He's interviewed with Rick Westhead to discuss what's next for pro sports. You know, are the leagues going to be hit hard like the NHL is right now? What about the NBA? And will they pause the season? Should they pause the season? Because let's just go through some and then let's talk. Calgary Flames have 17 members of their organization have been added to the protocol, and they will be out at least 10 days. And that includes, on top of that, Daryl Sutter, their coach, their associate coach, Kirk Mahler, and other staff members. We got Carolina Hurricanes. 6 players are off on COVID protocols. Boston just placed Paris Bergeron. Detroit just put Robbie Fabry and Michael Rasmussen. Washington just put Evgeny Kuznetsov. He's unavailable now. Florida Panthers have Sam Bennett, Radek Gudas, Ryan Lohenberg, Brandon Montour, and Carter Verhaeghe, and one member of the travel party, whatever that means. They're off and unavailable for the Thursday night game. The NHL is implementing enhanced protocols to defend against this. Where do we go from here, Pavel?
Oh, well, let me start first by saying that both myself and a fan of the show, Jordan, were in Calgary versus that Boston game. So I asked them what we left behind because it clearly wasn't our beards. Right? So you know, we liked the game. We thought it was good. You know, we didn't realize that the impact of it. Now, the thing I think needs to be addressed is that the league cannot shut down at this time because it's too much of an issue. Now, the Olympics, which is a separate thing, may not happen. And I can completely understand and comprehend with that with the wait times of if you are tested, you have to quarantine for 5 weeks.
Okay, whoa, stop. Don't go to there. We got to talk about the NHL first. We'll get over to the Olympics.
I will. Let me get to it.
You're blowing our thunder early, dude.
I'm just limiting. I'm just getting to that.
Yeah. Sounds good.
The NHL cannot shut down completely games because it's going to be too much of a financial burden for a lot of teams. A lot of the fans are already vaccinated, have to be, in order to enter these premises. And the fact is that these players are taking the best protocols that they are. And there's inside knowledge that some of the tests that are coming back aren't necessarily that they have COVID, but they're coming back as false positives, which they are just taking the precautions of not being around someone who has COVID or them being around other people, because then they can potentially infect other people if they do have it. But as a precautionary measure, like when you're sick, you sit at home, you kind of get better because you don't want to infect other people. And we know that the COVID, with any of the strains, it can be very, very transmissible. And that is one of the problems. And sports, like a hockey, like a basketball, you're in people's face. You're back to back, right? Football's a little bit different. Baseball, there's a little bit more space amongst the players. But in a bench, you're all huddled together, right? And I'm sure nobody is breaking the rules in that sense. I think they're doing the best that they can. But we can't limit these athletes from having lives outside of their NHL careers.
Wow. So, what would you say right now? So, right now on local radio stations, on your TV networks, social media across the board. So, there are restrictions across, the nation, in Canada, the states, other countries of the world, wherever you guys are right now, and you guys all have different restrictions. So, let's just use North America, where the NHL is right now. There's as far as limiting in NHL arenas, some have a little bit more depending on their state or province. But one of the things that's frustrating for a lot of probably more non-NHL fans or some NHL fans is the fact that they can not be wearing a mask, not be at a table or seated in a seat and be walking around because no one's really regulating that. And yet
Right.
local restaurants and businesses are struggling with that. Like what do you say to those people that, I mean, we're speaking as NHL hockey fanatics here, right?
Yeah.
Junior hockey, I think, is going to, when I'm talking junior, I'm talking the minor hockey, bantam, midget. I think it's all going to be affected even more so in the coming months. And you've talked about the less severity, but what do you say to those people right now?
I mean, it's a tough call. You want to protect people and you want them to have the best experience, but feel as safe as possible to go, because as we've talked about in previous episodes,
Yeah,
like sports and hockey is an entertainment, right? Yeah, these are athletes, they're at the peak of their prime, but it's a matter of safety. Can you make people feel safe, right?
yeah,
And if you can't provide safety in your arena, especially when people are so close knitted, because they're trying to all watch the game, and owners are trying to recoup some of the costs they lost in the last year and a half due to COVID. How do you go about doing that? And so a lot of arenas have made it mandatory where you have to show proof of vaccination. You have to wear a mask unless you're engaging in eating or drinking, whatever the situation may be, and these are little steps that you can take. But at the same time, we have to learn how to live a little bit with the virus and manage those expectations. Now, if there's a major outbreak, close it down. I think if that's the best course of action, because that's what needs to do to protect not only the public, and that's what doctors are advising, but also the players and the team coaches and staff like that. We do need to worry about that. But it's a tough gamble, right? Because the NHL is leaning on the professionals, the physicians that know this best, and they are getting their guidance from this. And this is why I think they have to make certain exceptions. Now, there is flexibility in the schedule. There is maybe percentage winnings like we did a couple of years ago with the bubble, and that's how we ended up with the playoff play-in round, things like that. That may happen. Maybe not every team finishes with a season. It's been going well, but you can't punish some of the other teams that have been following protocol and doing well and not having as many outbreaks as ones that aren't, right? And that's not to say that they're at fault. It's just whoever was in their surrounding area could accidentally have gotten it, right? And there's so much we don't know about this virus. We make sure people follow the guidelines in their province, in their state, in their country, by the physicians, what they are suggesting or recommending, because we are not health experts. They would know better. But it's tough, right? Because you have to manage and make do, right? I mean, there's other forms and venues of entertainment. Movie theaters. I've been to a few movies with friends, and people are spaced out, but same thing. You wear a mask coming in, you get scanned, you sit down, you have your popcorn as you're eating. You're not wearing your mask, right? But you're focused on one area and you're watching a screen, right?
Yeah.
But you're still around a lot of bodies, and then you all exit at the same time, right? So,
well, and I think the bigger problem people are worried about is because legally you're not allowed to be standing, drinking, like in hallways and stuff like that, but it's happening in sporting events and in these large venues everywhere. I can't imagine if you're from Las Vegas and you're at the Mobile Arena, I'd like to know what's happening there, just because you deal a lot with drinking in the city of Las Vegas with a lot of tourism and stuff like that. But okay, so Pierre LeBrun talked about on TSN. He actually had that discussion with some of the league officials, and they're saying, is there any possibility that we could be pausing? And they're saying no. The execs are saying there is no pausing going to happen. I mean, obviously, never say never. But I mean, like you said, right now at this stage, they're not just going to shut down on a what if. or a maybe. They're going to actually have to have health officials, I think, shut them down in order for the NHL to go into a pause. It won't be like the first time when they just heard of some cases, right? But I'm always worried with the NHL and Gary Bettman. If the NBA does something, they always follow suit. True. So I'm going to be watching the NBA really closely.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be watching that as well. The other thing that I'm going to mention is that we have to remember that they're not going to go to the extreme unless it's completely disastrous. They would more likely go back to having no fans or limited fans capacity, similar to what maybe Ontario's doing, before they shut down if Toronto was playing in Ottawa, right? Because that's in that province, and they say, you know what, the variant is spreading like wildfire. We can have the teams play because we can control that narrative and the linesmen and the refs and the coaching staff. Yeah. But the public can't be in there, which we may have, right? So that is something that we want to preface, right? And there's been already a few games that have been postponed. Calgary most recently, this coming Saturday, I believe, the Columbus Calgary game has been postponed, right? So things are going well. Now, here's the other thing. How does this affect a team who may be on a roll like Calgary, who's doing very well? I mean, they lost, I think, their last one or two, but before that, they've been on a hot streak. How does that impact that team and that dynamic? Can you get back into it? You know, we remember what happened with Vancouver, and Bo Horvat recently made comments to the media saying that it feels very eerily similar to what happened last year when that team went down because of COVID. So all these things are in play, right?
You really got to feel right now for the Calgary Flame fans, of course, unless you're an Oiler fan. You're, the ABC, anybody but Calgary, as we always hear. But as a Flames fan, it must be disheartening and worrisome. This team, Daryl Sutter has got them whipped into a position to play playoff hockey. Now, it's early. I'm a little worried he's playing playoff hockey too early. But the fact is, setting themselves up, and like Vancouver, like you just said, I mean, what if they end up like Vancouver coming out of this, or even like Ottawa the other year? This is going to be interesting. However, I think the key here for those that are following is the health, because Vancouver, there was no vaccinations. There was nothing to kind of lower the risk factors of, and they were quite sick. Whereas right now, most of them are asymptomatic and or very minor in their health. No one's being hospitalized. No one's showing these strong symptoms of concern. So that's a good part. But you're right. Like you said, you could end up going with less people. You can end up going to nobody in the stands. But there's no way this season will not be completed one way or another.
The one positive I would say out of this, which is very hard to kind of dwindle down to, is that if it is a few cases that it's you're tested positive for whatever reason, or you've been in contact with somebody who has COVID, because that's one of the things is, and we know that the NHL is testing, I think every second day. I think it's every 2 days that they're being tested. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of call-ups from the AHL and allowing a lot of these young prospects to make an impact and have their either first NHL game, point, or impact. And that, to us, you have to remember, that's a big deal for a lot of these kids who are trying to make their way in their career to make the team, right? To make the NHL is the dream. And these kids are getting an opportunity. And I know it's under not the best circumstances, just like an injury, right? If you have an injury on the front and back end. But it is showing it. The other thing that I think the NHL needs to realize, and we interviewed Sarah Ayers a few weeks back, and so check out that episode, is maybe the NHL does need to have 3 goalies ready each team, because you can't just have 2 goalies, because you're leading into an emergency backup goalie like St. Louis just recently did. Colorado did when it wasn't COVID related, but Kemper went down during practice, right? So do we see a third string goalie getting ready potentially in this situation?
Well, and I really got to wonder if are they going to stick with the emergency backup, because they're always worried about the Ayers situation again. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I think it's what hockey's made up of. It's what's entertaining. I do think that the NHL, because they're a bunch of killjoy sometime. They probably will consider before they did, if they started seeing too much, they probably would consider actually not worrying about the emergency backup and actually allow a third string to sit around. Even if it's someone that, has been a well-experienced vet that can sit for months and just play with the practice squad. However, I don't think that's very fun. And I think actually it's a great idea when an emergency backup goalie gets a chance to come in and the crowd has something to cheer on, man. That's the most exciting thing ever, to have another David Ayres story that will air on, so, and if you guys did not know, so just a couple weeks ago, we had Sarah Ayres, husband of the emergency backup goalie. She calls herself one proud owner of an e-bug. But just so you know, we had her on our show. Go back onto our YouTube channel and you can find that episode. I don't remember the episode number, or on our Facebook Live here. So, but yeah. So, okay, let's get to, you already blew the thunder about the weeks and how long with the Olympics. So NHL aside, we think it's going to happen regardless. I think that makes really boring podcasts because we're not arguing right now. But okay, let's go back to what you were telling us about the Olympics. Is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? Where we're at, we're only speculating. But what are you hearing and what are you feeling?
So what is being proposed now is that the onus is on the NHLPA for determining whether or not players feel comfortable and safe and agree to going overseas to China for the 2022 Olympics. That being said, one of the challenges is that if you are tested with a COVID test and you test positive, you have to quarantine for up to 5 weeks somewhere in China, wherever their accommodations are, and won't be able to return to your home country to play for your team until you have served that time. And so a lot of players are wary about this, and I think it's becoming more of an impact. Now, there is a 3-ish week window in February for the Olympic break, but it's also made just in case they need to make up games like the Calgary games that have just been recently canceled and rescheduled or going to be rescheduled. And a lot of players have come forward and kind of shared either they don't feel comfortable going, whether it's for personal reasons, political reasons, whatever that may be. But this is one of the things that is making them worrisome. Connor McDavid recently talked about that it seems a little much, right? And now think about this. You're going into play, and it's the silver medal game, and it's Russia versus Sweden, and they're coming in. I'm not making any predictions. Like, don't at me. Either team can go in, but these teams are going into silver. And, one of their players, Alex Ovechkin's test positive. So now he can't even play. He can't return to the Capitals. He has to wait 5 weeks. And he's played this whole time and made an impact for Team Russia. What do you do then? And now he's out 5 weeks. Yeah. Right? There's also a limited budget for the cost for providing for players. So once that runs out, where's the rest of that money coming from? From the IOC? It's going to be hard to say. So that's where we're at with that. Players are still hesitant. Now, I think the Olympics will still happen, and I think they'll still be competitive. The problem is I don't know if we're going to get all the superstars playing. And like Robin Leonard, who just recently said he'd take a step back, because it's also a lot of pressure to perform for your country and the high expectations, as we know. Yeah. We may not see a Connor McDavid and a Nathan McKinnon and a Sidney Crosby line, right? As much as we would love to as fans, one of those three or two of those three or all three guys may not come, right? And especially it's a player who's won before. Crosby's like, I've won my gold twice. I'm good. Why do I need another gold medal? Right. Whereas for a younger guy, it's more of an impact to represent their country. I was just going to say, all the fans that are non-Canadians are probably like, what a homer. We all want to see the Canadian team. Okay. Or a Matthews and a Kane and potentially an Eichel who is very close to recovering. So he may perform, right? So
yeah. No, I'm with you. I do not think that they're going to actually go. I think the 3 to 5 week, the only way that changes is if it's a maximum 10-day by China. But I believe by their standards, they have never had a 10-day isolation in place. So they will not go to that. The least they would do is a 14-day. And like you said, that's okay if it's at the beginning of the tournament. But if it's at near the end of the tournament, and who's going to pay that salary that's missed while they're away? Who's going to pay for a private charter back? Are they going to go on a regular plane that they're more at risk? I think, as much as our hopes, you and I, since we began this show, started talking, because they came back into the bubble with bases to play in this Olympics. And that was a part of our first shows that we started episoding, and we started dreaming up who could be on these teams. And I haven't actually talked about that or wanted you and I to have that discussion, because I don't want to get too excited. I don't want to get all our fans and followers all excited about teams. But I don't think until we get a go-ahead, and I believe, was it January 6th without financial penalty?
Yeah, that's the final day they need to determine.
So at that point, I think we're really going to know, because they're either going to pull out or they're not by January 6th. But I think we're not going to know right up to that date or within a couple days. But I'm going to say they're not, and I think that you're going to find all the other leagues may allow, like Swiss and Swedes and maybe even the KHL, which would be interesting. So let me make an early prediction of just a gut feeling. I think KHL allows it. And I think that the NHL pulls out, and I believe the Russian hockey team will actually take the gold medal. Wow. Woo! I called it, baby.
So that is true. That's another layer that people don't sometimes understand, is the diplomatic relationships that these countries have with China.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Canada, a U.S., a Russia, a Sweden, and Finland. That plays a little part, but it does have an influence. Now, what I presume they should do, and I mean, nobody's going to listen to some lonely podcaster who's got a beard, is I think they should extend the Olympics and make them a little further into the summer, maybe in August, because then we've gone through the process. The regular season is over, so you're not worried about anything. Players are off. And if they choose to do so, you're more than welcome to go represent your country in August, just before preseason. Now, I know there's logistics of what if they're injured at the start of the season. I mean, there's always that. But if you have it in the summertime, you can maybe potentially promote the game like they did with the women's tournaments, the Worlds.
Yeah.
And, bring in new viewership, right?
Wow.
And I'm sure the technology is there to keep the ice cold, right? And, of course, by that point, who knows where we'll be in the world. But you can move it. And I could be wrong, you guys can correct me, didn't the Japanese Summer Olympics get moved? Because I'm pretty sure they got moved a little bit further on.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So let us know in there, because I'm not sure on that one. I don't follow the summer as much as I do the winter, and I apologize for all you Olympic sports fans.
But either way.
But just write in the comments, what do you think of Pavel's idea of moving it maybe into the summer to get a possible, a delay on? I mean, they could still cancel, but if they could move it back, would they actually be able to still? Because right now there's no fans, there's no anything. And I got to be honest, I don't know how much I'm looking forward to seeing games that have no excitement in the stands whatsoever. I think that's going to end up like the bubble and the television. I'm worried how it's going to look televised. So I really got no excitement and no hope about these Olympics when it comes to the hockey part of it for the men's hockey. But I wonder what will happen on the women's hockey front. Let's make sure as soon as we get a chance, if we don't know yet, that we can talk to Cassidy Sauvé. She might actually have some interesting takes on that. So interesting. Before we go, you talked about, the diplomacy and everything happening. So down in the United States, so if you're an American, you guys know about this, that the Biden administration has imposed diplomatic boycott of the games. And what could that accomplish, and how they're wondering how's China going to respond. So if everyone follows, and this is interesting because now if I'm an NHL athlete and my diplomat is not represented in the country I'm going to, and we're in China where there's a lot of human rights issues. We've already, as a nation, for those that didn't know, in Canada, we have two people who have been released just a couple months ago here that have been detained, between 2 and 3 years. In captivity. I mean, it was a terrible story. I feel like there's been no repercussion to that. And this is just from my personal opinion, as just like he said, a podcaster in his mama's basement. Well, okay, I'm not my mama's basement. My mama wouldn't want me in the basement no more. But interesting enough, if you're not sending diplomats, why would you actually want to send a player? And why would a player want to go? Because what if something happens? You have no diplomats, nobody to represent you in that country at that point. So, and there's a lot of countries that are talking about that's what they would boycott. And so here's another question. Maybe make a quick comment before we move on, Pavel. Other Olympics in years past, did it benefit? I'm just going to take two really simple ones for me. So Lake Placid, not Lake Placid, sorry, Los Angeles, the Russians boycotted. And you also had the United States boycott Russia. Now, did it settle anything? Did it make things better? By players and athletes boycotting Olympics, this is the downside. I don't believe it proves or does anything to improve the relations of countries, and whether human rights or not. And these are mostly non-professional athletes. NHL is very different. NHL and NBA stuff with basketball. So how is this beneficial to someone who has trained for 4 years to make this? And this may be their only shot. This is their deal for sponsorship. They train and then say, oh, wow, just another 4 years. We got COVID. You can't go. It's just like, well, screw you and your COVID. This is my career on the line. And so I see a lot of the athletes that are not professional, that their career lies on the line in this, and or their passion that they spent since they've been a child to get there. Give me your take on that before we wrap on this segment part.
Well, clearly, I need Aaron for backup here because he's the political mastermind and with the political podcast. So he would be better equipped to answer this question. I mean, like I agree with what you're saying, which makes for terrible podcasting. But
and this show sucks.
I know, it's just awful. One guy can't grow a beard, the other one knows nothing about hockey, and then there's Pavel, right? So, but no, I agree. Like, you work your whole life to perform, and we're not just talking about hockey. Whatever Winter Olympic sport it may be, skiing, snowboarding, down sledding, like whatever it may be. Speed skating, these are athletes that train 4 years of their life, take so much energy, time, commitments, losing relationships or fracturing relationships or hurting because, you're so committed to this, to winning and representing from your country, just to even be nominated or qualified to get in. And then you can't even go, and maybe it's your last Olympics. Maybe you've been in 2 or 3. And this is your final one, and you believe this is your final chance to make an impact and potentially take a medal home, right? Wow. Preferably gold. It's a tough dynamic, and only people internally can answer that for themselves, and it's within them, right?
Wow.
Like I said, there's players who have medals, so they may feel less likely to go, and there's others who are more willing because they've never won a medal for their country and want to represent their country on the world stage.
Wow.
And I've enjoyed. I mean, the Sidney Crosby goal is always going to be infamous. Like, it's what it brought to Canada was beautiful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a heritage moment, as they say. So we'll see what happens. We're going to keep you guys posted as things roll around.
I want to make a quick mention. I was just pulling up my old information articles from the Board of Governors meeting in the NHL, just in regards to the Olympics and crossing over. And I was talking about a season. So Bill Daley had actually come out, and his words were, if there's a material disruption to the NHL season, then that agreement with the Players Association suggests that the league can ask for a pullout of the Olympics. So this
lawyer talk.
Yeah, it's lawyer talk, man. But you know what happens with lawyers? They make things happen eventually. So, okay. Well, hey, let's move on to, we kind of just tapped in on it the other week. GM search, general managers around the NHL. Let's jump over there and talk a little bit about this GM search. So specifically looking at 2 teams, Vancouver and Montreal. Before we get into this and talk a little bit more, our feelings and thoughts, what are names that are being tossed out there that you're hearing the rumor mill floating around, or maybe your personal insider you have that you haven't shared with me?
Well, before we get to that, I just want to rub it in and say how like I was right with the Boost Boudreaux and how they Vancouver Canucks on a 5-game winning streak, and I'm sure Vancouver Nation is just super happy with me because they have yet to lose. They were down 3-0 versus Columbus and came back and won. Like, say what you want, that team is on fire and red hot in December. But there's been quite a few names. So Jim Rutherford came out and said he has about 40 candidates for
40. Like there's 32 teams and there's 40 candidates. Who's he doing? Is he talking to the equipment managers about running this team? Like, come on, Jim. I know you're getting old, but come on. Okay. Anyway.
He has to throw out a number so that reporters can go with it, and we're talking about it here. Now, some of the names, as we talked about before, the Sedins are a big one. I know Kevin Weeks has been looked at a few times by a few other teams. He's an analyst for the NHL. He's been looked at and interviewed for, the Arizona job, for I believe it was the Florida job and one other one, right? So he's been considered. Mark Hunter's out there. He's for both them and, Montreal. The caveat with Montreal is that there's a fewer candidates. They're making the process work, but of course they would prefer somebody who is French speaking, right? That's kind of the thing. And there's been rumor that there's a potentially 3 to 4 female candidates who may take on the job. So that would be definitely a step in the right direction if they did that. But again, they have to have a really superb resume so that they can present their plan of how to better that team, whichever it is. And of course, Vancouver has a different trajectory than Montreal. Montreal looks like they're going to potentially go into a rebuild and reassess a lot of things and get rid of some of their other parts. Vancouver's looking just on fixing up what they have, retooling and reshaping, and continuing to be a potential playoff contender, which, I mean, they could still happen.
Wow. So do you think that it is a ploy with looking at in that extensive list, having 3 women possible GMs? The Major League Baseball is the only the only major sport to have a woman general manager. Do you think that that's just a ploy to make them look good just for their PR, or do you actually think they're serious?
No, I think they're serious. I think they're looking at candidates who have a lot of skill and potential, and somebody that can bring change. And that isn't to say that they can't bring him in a different advisory role, right? I mean, we're seeing more and more that there's, a GM isn't just the GM by himself. He has a partner. You have Ron Hextall and Brian Burke out in Pittsburgh. They're sharing the dynamics and maybe working with the owner in terms of the discussion, because you're wasting the owner's money here. Like, you're using it, right? And you want to justify what your choices are. I know that Toronto brought in, the name escapes me, you guys can write it down on the bottom, as an advisor. Haley
Wickenheiser?
Wickenheiser, yeah, she was brought in, right? So she's in a upper end management role to assist with the team, because she is a champion. She knows what it takes to win, but she also has leadership qualities. And if these 3 or 4 women candidates have that, why not give them an opportunity, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's so let me just say, so one, probably the front runner, because that most people haven't heard any of the actual female names that are out there. Yeah. So one of them specifically is Needham. And so she is an assistant general manager for Chicago of the United States Hockey League. Her name is Noelle, and she's been kind of building her resume her whole life. Basically, her career got ended early because I think she was like a teenager during her teen years, and she shredded her knee, and that was it. Tore her ACL, MCL, PCL, the works. And so anyway, so she's been involved, and now decades later, she's still been connecting and stuff. And that's been her goal, to become the first female general manager in NHL history. Now you would think, though, you wouldn't jump to the GM job before you get an assistant GM. Hence Keith Gretzky, even in the NHL, right? He's been an assistant but he hasn't been a GM. I think that they actually might look at an assistant GM for someone like Noelle Needham. That's my take. I think they mean something by it, and they're trying to do PR work. Remember I forget the guy's name. You remember, was it Lomax? What was the guy that they drafted and then they withdrew their draft pick?
Oh, Logan Mailou.
Yeah, I mean, like they've done some stuff like Arizona. It's just like, what are you guys doing, right? You're trying to outthink yourself, and I think they want to fix some of those mistakes and bringing diversity. And by the way, she would only be there because she's qualified. I think a lot of women never got in, not because they weren't qualified, it's because they weren't considered because it's a men's game, quote unquote, right? So I'm actually pretty excited to see what happens. Maybe she does join Kim Ng of the GM of the Major League Baseball Marlins. But anyway, the situation with Patrick Waugh, who announced he'd like to be considered for the GM of the Montreal Canadiens. I know there's been a lot of bad blood over the years, but it'd be interesting if they would actually go that way, but it will be a francophone. They have to. You got to be able, or someone who can at least speak minimum, at least, be able to carry an interview conversation. You don't have to have all the extra. You could have interpreters, but you need to be able to listen to people asking you questions in the interview without an interpreter along the way. I actually wish they would just skip that and they would just go with an interpreter. But I just feel like the push from, 50% of the population being French, it's just too hard for them.
I think it's a little bit outdated. I understand the culture and the history.
Yeah.
But I think they need to not make that comment. I think it was recently also the either the mayor of Quebec City or one of the politicians that said if Quebec had a team again, which Gary Bettman again met with them, so it sparked, a lot of rumors and gossip. But, he said that he would only create a team that's French speaking, which would be very, very limiting because let's say you have an opportunity to get Shane Wright and he doesn't speak French. They're going to be like, no, thank you. I'm passing on. And my other gripe is Vancouver and Montreal. Why aren't you calling us? We know what's up. I'm wearing your collars here. We know hockey. I mean, Evan doesn't know hockey, but I do. So I can happily do a GM job and leave my other job. I'll get gray hairs just like start looking like Evan. That Santa hat makes you look like you have a white fro on your head.
I want to jump over to Vancouver now for all you Vancouver Canucks fans. I know we were talking about the 40 and I was making fun of the 40. Rutherford, I don't know, it's just old man language. He just thinks that there's 40 people. Good luck interviewing 40 people. Let me throw out some long shots. Rocky Thompson, assistant coach, San Jose. Very good possibility. Now, someone that very few people know about, but he's probably the most top rising coach right now in the world, and he's for the Lions out of the Swiss League. And his name is Ricardo Granberg. He's 52 years old, and he is probably one of the best longtime head coaches. Not out of the Swiss, out of the Swedish league. This guy, if someone has been following him, and they must, I'm sure, and his name is starting to circle, could that be a long shot? And here's another one, and another assistant coach, bringing in fresh blood we're talking about, Lane Lambert, the Islanders assistant coach. Now, problem is mid-season for some of these guys, right? Now, if you're coming if you're playing in Sweden or the Swiss League, that's a different ball game maybe. But let me just put this out there. I think there's really only two options that the Vancouver Canucks are going to go with because of the previous connection and history to the team. And I think the number one front runner is Scott Mellanby. I think Scott Mellanby will be the front runner for that. But anyway, Stan Smeel is the long shot, but I think could do well.
Yeah.
He's
already involved.
Exactly. It'd be like Keith Gretzky in Edmonton, right? Previously, if they hadn't brought Holland in. Now, I want to throw the Sedins back out there, not for the GM job. They need training. What if they hired, as the general manager in Vancouver, Scott Mellanby or Stan Smeel, and they bring in the Sedins together as co-assistant GMs? They still get their role without taking the top role, and let's see how they do and who really finds their sweet spot between the two. Because maybe one just shows better at the job, or maybe they can prove they can make it happen.
Do you think you have to like barter with one, and then if that one doesn't agree, you go to the other, like you do with parents? If one doesn't agree, you go to the other one for permission. You know, you go to Daniel and be like, "Hey, you willing to trade your first round for this?" And he says no, so you go to Henrik and you're like, "Henrik, what about you?"
Oh, okay, Canuck fans, we want to know, even if you're not a Canucks fan, right down below, tell us, what do you think? Do you think the Sedins are going into management? Doesn't matter, GM, assistant GM. Do you think they even have a shot to do it together? Obviously one is going to do it for sure. I don't know their background history as far as when it comes to management and their abilities and their skill sets, but I don't know why, man. I've never seen a pair of twins in Major League Sports ever connect so well, and they almost are like they're one person. Yeah. So, okay, hey, can we change the subject just shortly before we get ready to wrap up here?
Sure.
So Pavel has no idea I was going to talk about this. This is something that I kind of just, it just kind of annoys me in the game, and I just didn't want to continue on. But now I'm getting kind of ticked. I want to talk about the allegations and the investigation into the Chicago Blackhawks, Pavel.
Can I just say that I never know what you're talking about, so it's just natural and normal for me. Most of the time you're on a tangent and I just zone out and think about non-hockey related things.
Yeah, you're thinking, well, what am I going to have for supper? Okay, so let's talk about Chicago. Representatives of the Blackhawks. So they have come and said there was no claim to Kyle Beach's lawsuit against them. So instead of paying out, they don't want to look guilty, the lawyers are saying, or whatever. Like, come on, guys. I don't care. You guys screwed up. You messed up. And if you don't believe you did, then why the heck did you fire people? You fired people because you know something went wrong. Accept the responsibility. Be good on this player. Be a better organization. Screw the lawyers on this thing. So what's happening is that right now, the situation is that now they are declining comment, of course, right? Because they're going to release a joint statement. The whole idea is what we're hearing. But they're hoping to settle a pair of these lawsuits. Now, the one, of course, is from back in May by Beach that accused Aldrich of the sexual assault. Now, I know it's just posturing, but I still think it looks bad. They should have just paid the extra. And like we said, I think the NHL saved them money so that they didn't charge him as much for a fine so that they could pay the boy, right? Or he's a man. I apologize about that. I'm just older. But also, they have another lawsuit against them by the high school student who was convicted of assaulting him in Michigan, of Aldrich. Now, interesting, because some people are like, well, this has no connection. Yes, it does, because they didn't do their due diligence, and they let a guy go and put him in a position that put a young man into a bad position to be abused. So I am like totally ticked off with this team. I am so not the players. I'm not blaming in it. This is about a leadership, management, ownership issue.
I put some onus on the top line players. Some that have been there, some that are still there, and some. But
what's that got to do with what's happening right now? The players have nothing to do with
their team. They did not stand up for their teammate, and they let him down. And if your teammates let you down, I don't know how you can look at them in the eye, like a Kane and a Taves, who are supposed to be leaders. Now, Stan Bowman wasn't fired. He was allowed to step down, you know?
Yeah,
so
fair.
That wasn't a good look either. The fact that the Chicago Blackhawks have been fighting this, it has really tainted their legacy in the last decade and a bit of what they have performed. And I have lost a little bit of respect for that organization because you have mistreated there. And how do you expect players who are up and coming to come into your organization and thrive when they feel like they can't even come forward when an allegation is happening? Now, I know that Sheldon Kennedy is working on potentially with a group for a 90-minute video to train people about how to come forward when there are allegations of any sort.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the Chicago Blackhawks have dropped the ball, and I think the fallout is going to continue to happen. We're just not seeing it as visible as what Kyle Beach had done. So I think there's still going to be effects. And one of the big things is ticket prices, ticket shareholders, and people coming to the games. Not just this year, but look at next year and what that revenue is. Right?
Interesting enough, though, in the Forbes magazine, they're still worth as much as they were before. Hasn't affected their value on the market, though.
Being worth is different than ticket prices being sold and people going to games, right? That's like completely like it. I understand that there's some correlation.
Going to games, though, as a team is bad, man.
Yeah.
It's okay. So the part I'm going to just say, I believe it's irrelevant right now, not before. Previously, when we had our discussions around the thing with the other players and saying the responsibility on the leadership, I think a couple things are not properly factually said from my perspective here. The one is that they were not teammates. He was a black ace, which is in a minor league guy. They don't stay on the same ice. Did they hear about it? I have no idea, and I'm not even going to comment on that part of it. Say they did, right? Say they had heard something or didn't, and I don't know. I believe in innocence until proven guilty, not what most of the world is now, where you're guilty and you got to prove your innocence. However, it needs to have investigations, 100%, and that falls on management. And I believe now, the reason this now makes me mad is because of the more than previously is because we're still seeing no lack of empathy and compassion on behalf of the team. And it's all about money and not about the person. And if they thought about the optics of a team changing and understanding that, they wouldn't have cared if it was a $10 million lawsuit or a $100 million lawsuit. They would have found a way to settle outside of court without trying to say that because it was the statute of limitations. That's why it was being dismissed. Yeah. And so get this. I delay courts over the years by not admitting or talking about it. And now I can claim the statute of limitations on the time because I made sure the time went by. It's like, come on, get real, man. Get real. So anyway, that's why I don't blame the players in this situation. Right now, I think it shows it's mostly, I'm going to put 90% on top management and 10% on the top leaders at the time. But
if you're gonna rant about teams, I get to rant a little bit about one team, and I'm going to rant about the Arizona Coyotes.
You got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes.
Arizona Coyotes not paying their bills and then blaming it on human error. I'm sorry, if I owed $1.3 million in taxes, I don't think I would be saying it's human error. So I have an issue with Gary Bettman pushing for this idea that, well, Arizona's good, they're paid up, they're good. They don't even have a stadium for next year. Where are they going to play? Their team is in disarray. They can't even pay bills this year for their rent. And then, so imagine you're Tempe, like the city council, and you're hearing the experience that Glendale is having. And then you're like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to give you a building, even though they're not showing their blueprints to the airport of how they're going to set up that thing. Can we just get over this charade with Gary Bettman and this Arizona practice thing and move that team? I don't care if it's Houston. I don't care if it's Kansas City. I don't care if it's Quebec. Just move them. Arizona does not work at the end of the day. Now, they gave us Matthews. That's wonderful. That's why we have him as a player. But at the end of the day, and I feel for Arizona fans, but what are they excited for? What is it from it? And now they've been shopping around Jacob Chikrin, who at the beginning of last season was their key piece that they would not move. So you know what? Arizona, get your stuff together because this is a family-friendly show. And I think that team is going to move. Just Gary Bettman is too stubborn to move it. That's another lawyer that needs to take a step back.
Well, I personally think you really should share how you feel. Don't hold back next time.
Okay, you got it.
I think we're going to take this little rant and we'll call it Pavel's rant, and I'm going to just post it on our Facebook page, just that little section. That's good. That was a good take. Guys, if you like his rant, right down there, you like, you comment, you share, get that out there. But we're going to have to call it a wrap for today. Next week, we're going to talk about juniors. What's up, man?
One last thing. So, with the holidays coming up, every team always wishes for something. Evan, what do you wish for in the new year for a team in the NHL? You can pick any team you want.
What do I wish for? Oh my goodness, you caught me off guard. What do I wish for a team in the NHL? I wish for a healthy Malkin Crosby duo for the rest of the season.
All right. Very good. I wish for the Toronto Maple Leafs to win a first round finally.
Oh man. Well, guys, that's your take from Pavel to wrap up the show. On behalf of Two Guys and Hockey Talk, in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice. Stay safe. Have a good night, guys.
Cheers, guys.